All right, everybody, this is a webinar that I tried to do earlier today, but we had some technical difficulty. I'm using a new webinar service, Google Hangouts. Gosh, they're just really finicky, and I haven't had much luck with them. So I think I'm going to be changing to something else, but I wanted to go ahead and record this fresh from the beginning. I did have it recorded, but it was choppy and cutting out, and terrible. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this webinar again. And guys, seriously, I will answer every single email you send to me, and if you post a question where I tell you to at the end, I'll do that as well. Also, below this video, you'll see some links to some good resources, so make sure and check that out as well. But let's get into it. So today I want to talk a little bit about my story in terms of my student loans, how they came to be, and how we managed to pay off 55,000 of them in 14 months. What's the purpose of all of this? Student loans, money, wealth, personal finance. Why are you watching this webinar? Why are you doing this? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Detailed rules and a plan that you can put into place, how much you should be saving, how to get your spouse on board, and we could do Q&A, but we'll do it via email. So a little bit about my story. I had a bachelor's degree in accounting, master's degree in accounting. I graduated around 2011. I had about $58,000 in student loans, somewhere there, 57 to 59, something like that when I quit, when I finally graduated college. And I started to work at PwC in 2011, and I ended up quitting my job at PwC in September 2013, and I honestly didn't make much movement on those loans. When I quit my job, I had about $20,000 in savings. I was just about to get married. That ended up costing us about $8,000, and I was starting two businesses. I was going out on my own. I wasn't working for another company, and so I wasn't making any money immediately. In fact, when I first quit my job, I was making nothing. So just to show you, these are some of the student loan companies that I've paid over the years. Chase Student Loans, Sallie Mae, Nelnet, Navient. That is obviously my wife and I at our wedding. I worked at PwC, and I went to the University of Tampa. So it sort of sets the stage for where we're going with this whole debt story. So like I said, in 2011, I graduated. I also passed the CPA exam, started working at PwC. And I honestly just paid the minimums. I didn't think much about the debt. I was just like, I'll pay it off one day. I didn't really have a plan of action. And by 2013, when I quit my job, because I quit in September, my wife and I, we had combined about $85,000 of income and about $55,000 of debt still. She didn't bring any debt to the relationship, but I had $55,000. And I'm going to be very transparent here with our income, our expenses, and our story, just to illustrate what happened. I'm going to tell you exactly what we're making, exactly what we paid down, what the story is. That way it's relatable. You can translate it to your story somehow. It's not like I was a wildly successful entrepreneur and made $5 million and I just wiped out the debt. No. We've been scraping together with side jobs, accounting work, and with entrepreneurship and small businesses. But yeah, like I said, in 2013, I quit my job in September. We got married in December. So as many of you know, for tax purposes, we were considered married, filing joint for the whole year. In January 2014, we only had $1,500 left in savings. And it's because of all the things I mentioned. Quit my job, got married, now on one income, never really thinking about budgeting or personal finance. And as ironic as it is for accountants, we only had $1,500 saved. And that was a big wake-up call. And that's where we really started to get on a plan of action. And luckily, over the course of the year, we ended up having about $110K of income. And we saved a lot of that. We saved about $65,000 over the course of that year. So we had enough to pay off the debt, but we didn't really quite want to do that. We weren't really 100% sure. We wanted to save up a little bit more money. So we weren't, now that we had a good amount of money, even though we had $1,500 before, we wanted to have a little bit more cushion between where we were and zero. So in 2015, we started to earn even more. It's only halfway through the year. We're expecting to earn about $130,000 this year, and we went ahead and just paid off all the debt. We finally paid all of it off in early 2015, and now we have about $70,000 in savings. So from January 2014 of having $1,500 in savings and $55,000 in student loans, here we are 14 months later, and we paid off all the debt, $55,000 completely gone. I made a $19,000 payment in one day, and I almost threw up. And we also have saved about $70,000 on top of that. So what changed? Well, it's weird. I was thinking about this when I was putting together the slide deck, and I always believed I would be wealthy. And that's why I never really worried about the debt, the loans. I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to have more than $50,000 in my life. Like for some reason, I can't even explain where that idea came from. I just always knew that would be the case. Or at least I believed that would be the case. But I never had a plan. I never had any action steps that I was on or taking to make that $50,000, to pay off that debt, to save. I just figured it would all just happen. And it really didn't happen. I mean, I was broke, right? I got married and we were broke. So it was not happening. And, I learned this throughout this whole process, that a goal without a plan is just a dream. And I'm not sure who said that, but it's totally true. I had a goal, I had no plan, and really it was just a fantasy until I started to put things into action. And we started with dreaming. We started out dreaming big about the things that we wanted in our lives. And then we started planning, and the results came quick. And, it's funny, when I was doing this webinar live, I knew I had the typo there, and I decided I'm not even going to fix it. I'm going to keep my typos in there. I swear, one of these days I'm going to do one of these webinars without a single typo. But I don't know, that may be in 2020 or something. So our dreams. I want to share with you the dreams that we had so you can use them to come up with some of your own. And you really have to let down your guard here. And you really have to, in school we're taught to think so small, and we're taught to think so little, and we're taught to think about very small things. Like you can save the environment by adjusting your light bulbs. And, they don't want you, don't think too big, too grandiose, too crazy, too out there. But I want you to do that. And when my wife and I sat down and did that, we came up with a list of some things. And here they are. We wanted to retire with at least $10 million in savings and investments. That's a lot. I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar would be happy to retire with that. I know I'd certainly be happy to retire with that, but we had that as a goal. We wanted to have the option for both of us as parents to stay at home and raise the children, at least for the first few years, those key developmental years, 1 through 5, really. We wanted to be able to spend more time together. When we were both working full-time jobs, commuting and traveling, there wasn't a lot of time that we were able to spend together. We wanted to travel the world and see over 80 countries. We wanted to start our own businesses and be independent, and we wanted to be able to pay for a house in cash. And we were sort of thinking eventually a house in the $300,000 to $500,000 range, but we wanted to pay in cash. Obviously many of us in our age group lived through the 2008 crisis, and while many of us were too young to be in that market, a lot of our older friends, parents, family members of our community lost a boatload. And while I don't think that we have to go through that if we necessarily take out a mortgage, we just don't even want to mess with that. If it's our personal house, personal residence, we don't even want to be involved in taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And so we finally figured out that we needed to get on a plan. And we decided that the first thing we were going to do was cut lifestyle to nothing. And I mean nothing. We were going to focus on producing more than we consumed and saving the difference. A lot of people think, I'm going to make $4,000 this month, and I'm only spending $3,000 this month, so yay, I have $1,000 to save up for a vacation. We were done with that. We were saving for the sake of saving. We wanted to pay off all of our debt, which really was only the $55,000 in student loans. We wanted to become remote workers. We wanted to save and invest in ourselves, at least $10,000 a year investing in ourselves. And we wanted to work extra jobs and side businesses to sort of work alongside this whole plan. And I think the two key points on this slide are the mentality of producing more than you consume and saving the difference. Just because you have extra money because you didn't, eat as much that month or you didn't spend as much that month, doesn't mean you save that up to spend it in the future. You have to build a nest egg. You have to build something that you're going to be able to retire on, that you're going to be able to invest with, that you're going to be able to buy a house with, that you're going to be able to take some time off in your life. I mean, you don't have to work every single year of your life. You still want to have the option to do things like stay at home with children. And the second thing on here is investing in yourself. I mean, this is probably, other than paying off debt and getting personal finances in order, this is definitely probably the second biggest mistake that a lot of young people make, I think, is that they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of time, energy, effort, and cash on education in college, graduate degrees, licenses, and certifications, but they hardly spend any money on themselves. They never consider going to therapy. They never consider getting a business coach. They never consider joining mastermind groups. And you're spending so much time, energy, and effort. And look, I get it. Skills are important. When you go to work, you take your skills. But when you go to work, you also take yourself. You also take your mind. You also take your energy. You also take your psychological health to work. And all of those things, I would argue, are much more important than your skills. And so you should be investing just as much, if not more, in yourself and in your own mind than in your hard knowledge and skills. So we didn't really have this calculation equation going in. But by the end of this, my wife was, researching a lot of personal finance stuff, and this is really something we live by now. And that is that our expenses equal our income minus savings. And, it's kind of a different way of looking at it. A lot of people say, oh, income minus expenses equals savings. No. Income is a variable for us. It goes up and down. But we know what we want to save because we know we're going to make a certain amount of money. And then we can sort of say, okay, well, then our expenses will be the difference of those. But we're not going to play around with the savings. It's going to be something that is a top priority for us and that we're going to be sticking to. It's not something that comes after our income and expenses. It's before. Learning to be content with what you have right in front of you. For us, it was fairly easy. We're married, and so we have each other, and we have a lot of things to be thankful for and that we enjoy, and so we don't have to spend all of our time and money on the weekends going out to eat, going and doing trips, going and renting a boat, all those kinds of things we used to do, spending money on alcohol and partying and all of that. And I get it. A lot of that stuff is fun, but it only is fun and makes sense if you're not broke. And when you're broke, no, you don't deserve to be able to go out and party every weekend. You don't deserve to be able to buy a bottle of Patron, even though I do like tequila. You don't deserve those things. If you want to be wealthy, if you want to be rich, if you want to have no debt, then yeah, I'm sorry, but you have to sacrifice. That's the way the world works. Nobody deserves anything. You have to work for it. You have to dream big and never compromise. And those goals we had before, those are still our goals. They seem lofty. I mean, look, we've been able to save $70,000. It's a heck of a way from $10 million. Yeah, we got 30 or 40 years probably before we retire, but still, we got a lot of work to do and a lot of ground to cover. But even if we don't meet those goals, we're not going to stop dreaming big. This is an old Dave Ramsey quote we learned throughout this whole process, that you need to live like no one else so later you can live like no one else. And that's exactly what we've done. We've cut our lifestyle to nothing. We've got creative with things that we enjoy, and we've saved, we've paid off all of our debt, and we're able to do things that other people just can't do. We paid off $55,000 of student loans in 14 months, saving 60 to 70% of our income. I mean, that's just a crazy number. And, a lot of people make a lot less than we do. We're very, grateful for the fact that we have high incomes. We have a lot of education behind us. We're obviously accountants. But most of the people on this webinar are in the same boat. You may not have two spouses, and I understand that both have, good earning potential. Sometimes it's not the case. But, you can still work it out. And we're going to get into some of the details about that in a sec. But we also have started to completely remote work so we can spend more time together. And like I said before, we've saved $70,000 post-tax, and we're growing that every single month. We are saving every single month. And that is really the point of this, is to continue growing, to continue adding to that all the time. And we were able to end up on the Dave Ramsey show for sort of a live video radio interview. And it's really cool. He's got about 10 million people that watches his show every day. We went on there and told our debt story of how we paid off the debt. We used a lot of his inspiration and motivation. A lot of the people that call into his show and tell their story really kept us going throughout the whole process. So it was fun to go there and show that. And that video is on the website. I'll also include that below this video if it's on YouTube, or also below on the blog and in the email. So check that out. But, this quote that I just love, because the whole reason that we were able to do this is because we were able to dream big. And if you don't have those big dreams, there's really no reason to do it. Because if you feel like you're sacrificing and you're giving up restaurants, and you're giving up vacation, you're giving up partying with friends, and you're giving up all those things, and you don't have a big reason, it's completely depressing. And so I just love this quote. The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. And that just encompasses everything that is at the root and the core of this whole process. You need to have a reason. You need to take a step back. Everybody's thinking, everything is so to the second, to the minute, everything that happens today, tomorrow, this week, next week. But think about the course of your life. A lot of people that are watching this are in their 20s and 30s. That's the majority of the people in the Bean Counter audience. And you have a lot of time, and laying the groundwork now is what really will set you up 20, 30 years down the road. If you can make the hard choices and the hard decisions, the hard sacrifices now, you'll be able to have those big dreams later on in life. I firmly believe that. And this quote applies not just to student loans. I think it applies to marriages, friendships, family, business, money, wealth, and all of life, really. I mean, it's amazing how much people shortchange themselves just by not allowing themselves to believe that they can. And I'm not talking any of this frou-frou, the secret stuff. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I just think that if you put something together in terms of a big dream, you put out a detailed plan of action to attack that dream, and you work on that for months and years, and you sacrifice to make it happen, like that quote says, you may not get there, but even if we miss our $10 million goal and we end up at $2 million, right? That's pretty amazing. That's better than most people. So we're aiming big, and I think you should do the same. And that gets me into the purpose of this whole thing, which is that, why did we pay off our student loans? It's not because we're little misers and we just love to count all of our Benjamins in the darkness and save up, extra money in the bank. No, it's not because of that at all. We wanted to live a life of freedom. We see money as a store of time and freedom. There's a day in everybody's life where money doesn't matter anymore. And if you have no money, it's the last day of your life. You don't have to worry about finding any more money because you're going to die. And, but for a lot of people, if you're very wealthy, and you have enough money where you never have to work again, it could be today. But at some point in your life, you've saved enough where you don't really have to worry about money. Money doesn't become a factor anymore. And just to give you some calculations to think a little bit about this, studies have shown that when money doesn't matter anymore is when your savings is approximately 300 times your monthly spend. So to give you an example, let's say you spend $3,000 a month on your life, kind of like we did. Once you get $900,000, then you never have to work again. If you earn 4 to 5% in the long run on investing that money, then that money will grow and you'll be able to live on that for the rest of your life. You'll never have to worry about it. And then you can retire early if you wanted. You could work on passion projects, be with your family, play golf, or just continue to work and get wealthier. It's really up to you, and that's the point. I mean, I'm not someone who's like, yeah, people need to retire early or work on their passions or play golf or get wealthier or spend time with their family. Like, I don't care what you do as long as it's what you want to do. When you have debt, what that is someone has a right to your future time, energy, effort, and freedom. They have a claim on the work that you're going to do in the future. And you want to eliminate other people's claims to your work in the future. You want to get rid of that completely. And that's a big part of why getting out of debt is part of living a life of freedom. To live an intentional life of freedom, that was really the big picture goal here. We wanted to focus on the why, the big dreams of our life. And for you, what is it? You have to have that. Wealth, travel, family, retirement, home, spending more time together, giving. Whatever it is for you, you need to have it and put the action steps in place to achieve it. So I want to share some of the detailed rules that, to be honest, we kind of learned some of these while we were going along. It's not like in the beginning we were pros at this. We just knew exactly what needed to be done. We learned some of this as we were going. And, the number one rule and the number one thing that helped us, I would say, would be cutting lifestyle. And that's going to be the case for everybody that's listening to this webinar. Because if you're listening to this webinar and you're in the Bean Counter community, you're going to earn a high income. There are very few accountants that graduate with a CPA license that earn $26,000 a year. $26,000 a year for an individual is what the median wage is in the United States for an individual. I think the median household is somewhere around $52,000. So anyway, if you're an accountant, you're earning much more than that. So your problem is not how much you're earning. Your problem is how much you're spending. And so your number one thing you need to be looking at is how to cut your lifestyle. No leases, no car leases. That's just another form of debt. It's a terrible deal. The real interest rate they're charging on those suckers is like 14, 15, 16%. I don't care what they tell you. They're totally lying. I know people that have worked in car companies. I know people that have audited car companies. Never lease a car. Leasing a house and renting, that's a totally different story. I think a lot of times that's a lot smarter than buying a house, especially if you can't afford it. And in my opinion, if you take out a mortgage, you really can't afford it. I know that's a debatable point, and that's fine, but no leases on cars. No credit card debt at all. If you have credit card debt, stop it completely. Get rid of the credit cards and start to pay that off. No car debt at all. If you have it, consider selling your car, especially if you're not underwater on it, but you probably are underwater on it, in which case you need to work on paying that off as quickly as possible. No student loan debt. Get on a plan to pay that off. And, my wife and I in particular, we don't believe in mortgage debt. We're not going to take on mortgage debt. If you already have it, no big deal. I owned a house once before. I had mortgage debt once before I got married. And it's just, We'd rather save up. Think about it. The house I bought in 2010, I bought for $70,000, okay? And I had a total mortgage on it. I think I put 3.5% down. And I got a great deal on a great little house. But now I can pay for that house in cash, right? So, and only a couple years later. So I really don't think it makes much sense to get a mortgage. If you have trouble areas in your budget where you know you're spending a lot, maybe that's, for us, it was food. It was food and restaurants. What we did was we used cash. So at the beginning of every month, we'd go to the ATM and we would take out the cash we needed to spend on restaurants and on groceries. And we wouldn't be able to use a card. If we went to a restaurant, can't use a card. Went to the grocery store, can't use a card. Have to use the cash. Therefore, it's a fixed amount. It's right there. When you use the card, it's kind of like the never-ending pit. It always spits out yes, right? But the cash, once that cash goes away, that's all you have. You're a little bit more stingy and you're a little bit more aware of what you're doing. We did a detailed budget every month together. We hardly went out to restaurants anymore. And in the beginning, we still kind of did, but it really faded and faded and faded. We didn't drink anymore, no smoking. We didn't really smoke that much before. No vacations, and we really went crazy. Like in the beginning, it was tough. I'm not gonna lie. My wife, we've talked about this openly before. It was really tough to get her involved, and I can't blame her. I brought $55,000 of student loans to the marriage. She didn't bring any debt to the marriage. Granted, she didn't have any savings, and she was overspending, but so was I, and I had a bunch of debt, and so she did have to sacrifice her life for us and for our marriage in the first year, and that was tough. And, I totally appreciate that, and it's amazing that was able to happen. But that's really the only way it can happen, is if you really start to get crazy, cut lifestyle, cut your expenses, and get in gear. And, I remember talking to people, and they were saying, well, yeah, I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand about this whole personal finance thing. It's easy. And I was like, and then I would start to ask them about their situation, like, oh yeah, well, I got $15,000 car loan, I got $25,000 in student loans, I got a mortgage, no, I don't have any credit card debt. And I'm like, but you don't look like, the best state of, they got $15,000 in savings. They don't look at a great state. Their net worth way negative. And they did not get on a plan like this. They did not go crazy. They just continued to live their life, pay the minimums, maybe get another car for the wife or the husband or whatever, the kid or whatnot. And they are still living their life with a healthy, with a substantial amount of debt, relatively little savings, and not really making any major moves in one direction or the other. Meanwhile, like I told you, we've been able to save a lot. I went into my Mint account and I screenshotted where it said peak net worth $85,000, and that's a little high because we do owe some money to the government in quarterly payments because of the way we earn money with some of our small businesses. So it's closer to $70,000 that we actually have as our own. We're also done some extended traveling. Those are pictures of where we are staying in Costa Rica, and we're only able to do that because we put our plan in place to be able to live remote, pay off all of our debt, earn an income, produce more than we consume, and save the difference. And we have more money than we've ever had before. We're not wealthy, we're not the 1%, but we're definitely on our way there. And we've been able to have a life of freedom that a lot of the haters and a lot of the doubters, now I think a lot more people have come around to it because we actually succeeded in paying it off so quickly. But especially in the beginning, they thought we were sort of nuts. It's sort of pointless, like, why do you need to pay off all your student loans? Like, they'll go away over time. And the truth is they really don't go away over time. If you keep those suckers around, you'll end up paying double or triple what you would if you paid it off in a year or two like we did. Look, and I'm not going to lie, for some of you, this is going to take a little bit longer than 14 months like it did for us. Some of you, it's going to be shorter. But at the end of the day, all that matters is the direction that you're headed. You might live to be 80 years old. If you spend 1 year, 2 year, 5 years working on paying off this debt over the course of your life and in the big picture of life, it's really not that long. And you need to start to look at it that way in order to be able to sacrifice to be able to get it done. I'm going to show some examples here from our budget. And like I said, below this video is going to be links to the budget. So you'll be able to find that. And you'll be able to actually download that and use it for yourself. It's a very comprehensive net worth, monthly income and expense budget that we used. It's very good for accountants. I wouldn't say this is great for, a marketing major because it's a little bit in detail, but for an accountant, you're going to love this spreadsheet. I'm telling you, you are actually going to fall in love with it. It's amazing. And so look over here at the left at the first green square. This is our take-home income. So this is after taxes and other withholdings. And these are just numbers to play around with. That's not exactly the amount that we make. Our income fluctuates from month to month. I mean, I'm not going to kid around with you, and I'm not saying this to brag. It's just that some months we'll make $4,000, post-tax take-home, and some months we'll make 15 or 20, and it's just very up and down depending upon what's going on. If we're working, a contracting job, or if we're doing well in our side business, it just can really depend based on a number of factors. So I just wanted to make this easy though, and let's say you have $7,000 of income take home, and then you go into these mandatory expenses, and I break expenses up into mandatory and living expenses. Not everybody does that. It's just easy for me to think about it that way, and what that means is mandatory expenses are like, these are fixed amounts that I owe other people, and they might change a little bit, like internet or not internet, but electric. But I know I'm going to have to make these. Like, these are part of the essential costs of life that other people are expecting, and I really don't have that much control over them. Things like rent, car insurance, phone, internet, electric, the student loan minimum payments I have to make. Those are all the things that I think of like, okay, these are for sure going out the door. And that was about $2,000 a month, which left about $5,000 at the bottom there in that bottom green square, about $5,000 for living expenses. And this is where you have a lot more say in how much this can change. It can be twice or three times as much as it is here, or it can be a little bit less than what it is here. But I looked at groceries, toiletries, restaurants, haircut, medical, gas, tolls, other. And we always sort of try to make this as low as possible. And this is the area that we spent the most of our time reviewing, because in the mandatory expense section, okay, we kind of knew what was going to be there. We knew it was going to be there. But in the other section, in the gas section, the restaurant section, toiletries, groceries, we were really looking at that to make sure that we weren't getting out of control. And in a lot of these circumstances, like I said, we did use cash. But let's say you look at this and you have $4,000 to apply to debt or savings. And that's exactly what we did. So, think about the total debt that you have, and think about the monthly cash that you can apply. And you take that total debt divided by that monthly cash you can apply, and you want this to be about 24 months or less. So let's say we had our $55,000 in student loans, and we had about $4,000 a month to apply at that. That comes out to about 14 months, and that's kind of right around what we did. But if you're more than 24 months, then I think you need to really think about increasing income and cutting expenses. And I'm going to talk about some examples on how to do that. I never want to see anybody's total expenses be more than $40,000 a year, and that includes your minimum debt payments, and that's for a couple. So if you're single, it should be less, like closer to $25,000, and that's especially when you're going through this process. Like 40K is very generous. Like, it should be lower. And honestly, like our expenses could have been even lower if we would have moved somewhere, paid less for an apartment, and we didn't do that. We did keep a certain degree of lifestyle, although we did cut a lot, I won't lie. But if you want to get creative in cutting expenses, no eating out. If you need to move in with a friend or a roommate, go for it. I recommend that before moving in with your parents. Change cities if you have to. Nobody has a right to live in San Francisco or New York City or Chicago or some of these great, big, expensive cities. You don't have a right to live there. Do you want to have money? Do you want to have no debt? Do you want to have freedom? Do you want to retire with dignity and be wealthy? Well, you should consider going to a city that is not just completely gouging you in cost of living. No vacations, no gifts and parties for friends. No spending. You don't need to be spending $150 on all your friends' gifts for their parties and everything. Okay, make them something. I don't know. Get creative. Do something that doesn't cost anything, but is still meaningful to them. Look. Occasionally, I would go to Publix, which is the grocery store where I live, and I would purchase a $2 beer. Occasionally, but that was my treat. And to be honest, that was the only alcohol I was really drinking during that whole time, unless it was on somebody else's dime. Somebody had me over like, oh, Andrew, you want a beer? I was like, score, I could have a beer now. But I really did not spend any money on alcohol. And I know a lot of people out there do. I remember, when you're working in public accounting, you're going out with the team, you're going out with friends on the weekends, you could easily spend $100 on partying and alcohol. And that adds up to about $400 a month, which adds up to about $5,000 a year. And you could be putting that right on the debt. So, take a look. The real way that people get screwed here is death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one payment that you can cut. It's everything that needs to get cut. And that adds up to my last point here, that this really only works if you do everything. If you just do one thing, you just cut, I'm just going to cut the vacation. Or, I'm just not going to eat out as much. No. You have to cut everything. I'm sorry. If you want to get on a real game plan, you got to cut it all. And increasing income. This, for a lot of people, is a lot harder, but nowadays it's getting so much easier to make an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And, first off, work hard at your job. Ask for a raise once you deserve it. You can totally try that out. But then I would look at side jobs and businesses. Deliver pizzas. I know a guy who has a BMW who was delivering pizzas in his BMW, but he was making $1,000 or $1,500 a month. Yeah, when he would go, people would scorn at him and laugh at him and make fun of him, but he's debt-free, and he's got a BMW, and that's a lot more than I can say for pretty much everybody else. You can work for Uber and Lyft. These are where you can turn your own car into a taxi. You can do dog vacay, which is doggy sitting, dogvacay.com, sittercity.com, where you can become a babysitter. Airbnb, if you've got a big house or apartment with an extra bedroom, you can rent that out to people that are coming into town and make a little money that way. You can start a little bookkeeping and tax business on the side, or any other small business idea that you've had. And the trick is here to do not spend money to start a business, okay? Nowadays, with the internet, with technology, with all, you don't, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and they were like, oh, she wants to start this business, but she doesn't have any money. And I was just saying, well, so what? Pretty much every business I ever started with no money. And some of the businesses I've made have made pretty good amount of money. Obviously, you've seen my income, so I'm not, Bill Gates here, and never will be, but I do okay. And I hardly ever start with any money. If you are going to start a business, that does require a little bit of startup money, and you're going through this whole process, I would say the ceiling is $1,000. If you have to spend more than $1,000 to start the business, then I would start to think about something else that you could do first, and save up the money for after, pay off the debt quicker, and then when you want to start to invest $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 into something, you're doing it when you don't have personal debt, and you're doing it in a lot less risky of a life scenario. Last thing I want to talk about here today is how to convince your spouse. So the way that I did it was, it was tough in the beginning because, like I said, my wife, she didn't bring the debt to the marriage. She didn't have great spending habits. She wasn't in debt, credit card debt or anything, but she was spending exactly 100% of what she was making. So she wasn't saving anything. And, when I realized that we had this debt, we had no money, and we needed to really kick it into gear, it was tough. It was tough. It was not an overnight thing. It was not a first conversation thing. This was a multi-month transition. And I realized over time that I needed to focus on why we were doing this. Because we wanted to be wealthy, we wanted to travel, we wanted to spend more time with each other and with our future children. We wanted to retire if we wanted to. If we wanted to be able to have that option. We wanted to be able to buy a home in cash. We wanted to be able to spend more time together. Those are the reasons why. I had to focus on the dream with her, show her the bigger picture, so that way she could tie that in with why we were taking these punitive actions in the short run. And that's when once I got her, hooked on this dream, then I laid down the whole, that we're going to have to cut the restaurant budget, babe, and we're not going to be able to spend as much at the grocery store, and we're not going to be able to go on as many vacations. And she started to understand the short-term pain and the long-term gain and tie those together. And that is really the best way to convince the spouse. And I was unlucky. I went straight for the cutting lifestyle instead of teaching her about the dream first. But I think if you start with the dream and you start to say, hey, why do we, what do we want our lives to look like? Do we want to retire? How much money do we want to have? Does one person want to stay home with the kids? Do we both want to stay home with the kids? Do we want to work for the rest of our lives? Or do we want to have the option to retire? Do we want to travel a lot? What do you want life to look like? Dream about that together, and then think, okay, what do we have to do to have a plan to put into place to get there? So I want, if you've watched this webinar, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that we had the technical difficulties. I'm glad I was able to record this and get this out to everybody. I will get this webinar problem solved. It's a problem with the provider. Google Hangouts is just very laggy and choppy. The other service I use was perfect. So I'm going to think about switching back. But for now, go ahead and comment on thebeancounter.com how I paid off $55,000 of student loans in 14 months. If you're watching this video later, it might not be at the top of the homepage like as a post, but it should be on the top left as one of the top posts. We currently have about 56 comments on this post, and I either want you to comment with any question that you have, or for me, and about your situation, your particular story, or if you're curious more about my story, or comment how much debt you have and what your plan is to pay it off. I'd love to hear. We've got a lot of really cool stories there. If you go over there and check it out, you'll be able to see the comments. And if it's no longer in the top posts and it is no longer on the homepage of the bean counter, then just go ahead and Google and type in the bean counter and type in $55,000 student loans, and it should be the first thing that comes up. Yeah, and I will be sending, like I said, an Excel budget to everybody and the recording of this. So if you did attend the webinar, obviously you're watching this and you got it in email. And please share this with friends. I would love to see a lot more people. I would love to see a lot more accountants become financially savvy, personally financially savvy, because unfortunately, once you start to ask them, they really are not. If you want to email me directly, you can email me at andrew@thebeancounter.com. Thank you so much for tuning into this webinar, and I will talk to you soon.